All right, welcome everyone. So nice to have you with us today. So this is an interesting topic. It's one that is very important to Tim and I. Over the years, we've really focused on this because we felt that it was a lost opportunity, perhaps in our early days of training, and we developed it over the years as we worked in sport, as we worked with clients, just noticing how important coaching the body was. That we weren't always getting the results we wanted, or we were getting sometimes surprising results using the coaching when it wasn't done correctly. And that there were certain things that very simple, but if you did them, had a huge impact on the ability of the client to make changes to get past stuck points. So we'll talk to you a little bit about how you'll notice what's going on and some practical tips about how you can manage it.
So it's more of an extension of the models that you're already using. So just wherever it fits with I know there's a variety of coaching styles and skills in the room. So wherever it fits with your model, just about extending it as another way to understand what's going on in these moments.
So here's an interesting quote from somebody called Bessel van der Kolk. He talks about, after his research with trauma victims, how this separation between mind and body seems to take place with trauma victims. And there's this lovely sentence that he makes here that he says, when you are frightened, it means that you live in a body that is always on guard. Angry people live in angry bodies. And that in order to change, people need to become aware of their sensations and the way that their bodies interact with the world around them. Physical self-awareness is the first step in releasing the tyranny of the past. So it's interesting how he uses this word, becoming aware of the sensations of what's taking place, but also physical self-awareness. So in a situation that he's describing, which is physical trauma, the separation between the mind and the body is very obvious, where there seems to be a lot of things happening in the body. The mind can't cope with it. The two don't integrate, and how that just adds to the trauma and holds trauma in the body for a long time. So this concept of stuff being in the body, for want of a better word, is well researched. Here's 3 books that we really recommend that you read that discuss this topic. So the one is the one by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps Score. The other one is by the researcher Candace Pert, called Molecules of Emotion. She's the one who found the original opiate receptors on cell level. And she highlighted how emotions like pleasure, joy, satisfaction can be tracked at a raw cellular level. And then Tim's book, Game Changer, which goes into detail on some of the changes that can be done from mind to body.
So it's easy to see with trauma that there is this thing going on. There's a separation. There's almost like there's these blocks. And what we notice is that it happens with small T traumas, with anxieties, with fears, with worries, with stress, when your boss, makes a statement that makes you feel embarrassed, or that you make a mess up at work, or wherever the context is. And so the question we start to ask ourselves is that, yes, it's kind of obvious there, but could the same thing be happening at a smaller level, still a very significant level, but not maybe in lights level for others, in other contexts, for athletes before they're playing the big game, for executives when they've got to have tough conversations, for all of us when we've got to talk about our pet subject, about money, about health, about relationships, whatever those things are. And now there's this other context where in the society, we generally encourage not to listen to our bodies. We are generally encouraged to be tough. And we've got all these metaphors about putting on your big boy pants and manning up if you're a man, about not being able to slow it down, not being able to understand, not being able to meditate or to reflect. And also sometimes we're just too damn busy. We don't have the time to, I've got a meeting starting in the next minute of the next minute, and we don't have time to be able to understand what's actually going on, or we don't have the methodology to do that.
So you kind of get this thinking of just push through it, move on, get over it. So instead of taking the time to check this integration of, I have an idea or something has happened, I have a belief, and how is that impacting me and integrated into the mind-body system, we just mentally move on. And we believe that this is causing a lot of the lack of integration that people are experiencing, and it'll come up in the coaching or when people are trying to make change processes. So this whole idea of mind to muscle is not a new one. It's been around a long time, right from the early NLP days. So Michael Hall has a mind to muscle pattern. So anyone who did meta-coaching, ACMC will know the mind to muscle pattern. And as a pattern, what it does is it says that you take a concept, something that I'd like to do. So for example, somebody who wants to be more proactive, it's a concept. Okay, so we take that concept and make a decision. The decision is, I will be more proactive. So from concept, you make a decision. Then you step into the emotion or the movie mind, as we might call it. I see myself fully there. How will I feel when I'm doing that? What will that give me? What are the benefits? So I step into imagining myself in that, which brings all those extra sensations of the emotions and the movie mind that we would imagine in our head. And then you try it on. So that last step of, so how would you feel if you were doing that? How would that sit with your body? Can you imagine yourself doing that? So it's a very powerful process because it creates this idea that we can take concepts which are theoretical and out there and integrate them into the system quite quickly. And any one of you who's ever run this pattern can see how powerful it is for taking ideas and concepts and getting them into the body. So this mind-muscle pattern is around for a while, and we can do it very consciously using a pattern like this. But my sense is, and Tim's sense is that we do this a lot more often than just when we consciously want to run a pattern like this. Many beliefs, week by week, as you make up your mind, as you make a decision, as you take on a belief, gets mind to muscled. We see this in the sports world, this whole concept of getting something into muscle memory through repetition, through practice, is really a critical factor in success in any sport. But why do we believe that it happens in sport, but we don't buy into the same concept happening in business or in life or in a relationship? That something is put into muscle memory. So particularly when there's a strong emotion, we find that particularly would anchor it in.
And the contrary is true then, is that what things are already in muscle memory, what things are already in the body when we're trying to do something intellectually, or we've got a belief or decision that we want to go do something, be something, behave in a certain way, and somehow we feel trapped or stopped, or we feel stuck, or we don't feel that we can actually do it. So it's the first thing is to realize that this is a healthy human process of having those things all the way through. And we do it in this context of the mind to muscle pattern, but we don't always do it in our coaching conversations. We don't always do it consistently if you really want to integrate something. And there's some stuff there already that's stuck at whatever level, perhaps all of them, perhaps just in the body level, that's getting in the way of whatever outcome we're going for.
So if that's the case, what are the levels that you would want to work things through with change? Our sense is these are the levels of change that a person would work through. So it would start off with an idea, a simple idea that I would have. You can use different words for this. You could use the word frame or a concept. I hear an idea, I think about it, I like it, I agree with it. So there's a lot of intellect involved at the idea level. To start onboarding it, we make a decision. I like that, I want that, I'm going to do that, I'm going to try that. So we move from just a basic idea to a decision. At the decision, it becomes a belief, because a belief is fundamentally an idea that we said yes to. So now it becomes a belief because we've made a decision about it, that we agree with it. Then we step into the emotion of that. So we're moving down the level of imagining what this would be like. How would I see myself doing this? How would this become part of my life? There's how I would feel about it starts coming into this. And our emotional drivers would become attached to this decision now. Because we know that no decision is made purely intellectually, but as you step down the levels, every decision has an emotional context. From there, then, it goes into the body, into the energy system of the mind-muscle system. At cellular level, we now start adopting that idea. And we talk about a skill or an idea or a belief that has been put into muscle memory at this point in time. So think about it as moving through levels of adoption. And if you really want to work with a client, this is something that you might want to check. When I'm coaching, when I'm working with a client, where do I work a lot? Do I work only at the idea level? Because I've fallen into that trap. Like, what do you believe about this? So maybe the first 3 levels. What's your decision? Do you want to try something new? Here's something better to try. Why don't you try this new skill? Here's a new theory that you can adopt that will help you to do things better. Here's a more practical way of doing it. All those things, it's good coaching because it brings change to people. But it's only the first 3 levels. It's only when I realized that you also need to work in at the muscle memory level by integrating it fully that the coaching really, really becomes effective, because now you're creating this congruence. So here's this idea that if you really want to create strong alignment, this congruent alignment between belief, the decision, the emotions or the movie mind, and the body and energy system needs to be in place. And I think you've all experienced this, that when we have a strong sense of alignment, that I'm doing my purpose, I feel emotionally aligned with this, we have a sense of confidence, which is a body message that this is working for me. How powerful we feel when this is in place.
And so the converse is also true, is that when it's not in place, when we're doing a lot of the work, but not all of the work. And unfortunately, what we've seen again and again and again is if there's a conflict between the top part and the bottom part, the mind and the body wins. Yeah. Which means you could still do very powerful, great coaching sessions, but because you missed out that bottom layer under pressure, under stress and anxiety, all those moments, the mind's got to choose which one's going to lead. Is it going to be the mind or the body? And the body is the leader in those moments, in those contexts. And of course, the stuff that's at that body level is normally not so great. It's normally the anxiety that you haven't dealt with, the fear that you haven't processed, the limiting belief that's just so part of you that you don't even know that you could have a day when you don't have it. It's still stuck there, waiting to hold you back. And it might hide out because you're doing some good coaching, some good progress. But under pressure, here comes a thing. Hello, my old friend. Nice to see you again. And we talk about it. We talk about it in coaching. Often say, oh, is this coming back again? It's another layer. Well, because the layer's in the body level and we haven't dealt with it properly yet.
Yeah. So think about this, where the 4 were in alignment, and now you just move a decision. Because perhaps you have to, because there's trauma, you grow up a little bit, new things happen in life. You might even go through a coaching process and you decide, I no longer want to be on this path. This behavior doesn't feel right anymore. This no longer fits with me. I want to move. It starts with an idea. We move the idea across. We cognitively choose to be a different person. Sometimes we cognitively choose, and sometimes life just forces us to move. That involves decisions and it involves the emotions. Our sense is that, once again, if change is not made correctly, you can have these top 3 moving along and leaving behind stuff stuck in the body. So this whole concept of something gets lost, something gets stuck or left behind when we make changes. All right, so now what happens is you've got this lost belief, this lost energy, this lost idea stuck in the body. So now we're trying to adopt a new sense of behavior because we've moved on, we've decided this is what we want to do. But now we have these experiences of lack of congruence, senses of conflict, other things start popping up because the whole lot didn't move together. We didn't bring the body along when we made the mental shift.
So we know this at a certain level. We know that we can't just coach to one level in coaching. So it's almost like the missing piece. And I'm really curious, like the origin of the missing piece, because it would have been great to know all the stuff back in the day. It'd be great to know that, you know, when you spend so many sessions working on the same thing, it's just because you're working at the wrong level. But it's the norm. It's the norm that we've seen. And it was really frustrating in our own practice and our own experience, either being coached ourselves or coaching others. Like, surely we should have moved on by now. Surely this should have been done. But because we didn't do all the levels in a way that was accurate, we're actually setting up coping mechanisms. We're actually setting up internal conflict about that thing. And that internal conflict gets amplified or multiplied under pressure.
So think about the change pattern that we use as meta coaching. One of the critical things that you want to do when a person adopts the new idea is to future pace it. So this whole idea of future pacing is really important because it's part of this process of, imagining yourself do this. So imagine when you walk out of today's coaching session and you try this tomorrow. What will that be like? How will you feel? How will you identify with that? So that a whole concept of future pacing is where this is brought into training. But Tim, in my experience, I didn't do it enough, the future pacing. And a lot of the coaches that we see and supervise don't spend enough time in the session getting it into the body or future pacing it to check, is there an alignment process? So these are some of the signs that you might start noticing now, that something's happening, that is not working, that perhaps there is the stuck muscle memory. So one of the things is you keep cycling back to it. So you've been coached on this lots of times, perhaps. And every time you get coached on it, there's a real determination in your head. I want to change this. You work through the processes. You understand the structure of it. I'm going to go and try it. 3 months later, you're back again. And it's like, why do I battle to make this change particularly?
Sometimes in a session, when you're the client or your client just can't find the words to express what's going on. It's like a feeling. It's an overwhelm. It's an intensity. It's a heaviness. And even those words are like hard fought for. Like, what's going on for you? I don't know. Where is it? I don't know. And you've got to really kind of be patient and almost kind of fish around to find, because for them, they've got no map of how to talk about this thing because they don't understand what's going on. And if your model doesn't show you where to go, that's the kind of symptomology you're going to get in your sessions.
One of the things that I'm very aware when I'm coaching someone is to observe them, what's happening for them physically. So people talk about a physical sensation of, I thought I was ready for that presentation, but when I got there, I thought I was going to throw up. I had this like lump in my throat. There was this heaviness in my chest. I had this knot in my stomach. My fists were clenched. I felt like I couldn't breathe. So people describe a physical sensation occurring when a particular event occurs. And even though there's lots of coaching around preparedness and confidence and all those type of things, the physical sensation still remains when they try that particular event.
And over time, this creates a sense of stuckness. It often shows up as procrastination or like, slowing down. You kind of slow down as you get towards a goal or a deadline, because at some part of you knows, oh, hang on, I know how this ends. I do all this work, I do all this effort, and I can do the presentation and my throat is dry, or I get to the key moment in the trial or the game and I just don't have the same skills. And we've all got our version of those game moments, whether it's talking about a difficult conversation or a difficult subject or having something on the line. And after a while, you just stop going through the same momentum because I know I've seen this story before. I'm living a Groundhog Day, but not in a good way.
And then the one that's really, really obvious is the feeling of internal conflict. People talk about it doesn't sit well, it doesn't feel right. I feel like it's not working for me, so I know this, but any signs of that language of internal conflict speaks to a lack of integration. All right, so now if you're picking that up in the client, you're in a coaching session, what do you do? All right, so we go into a lot more detail in this in some of our other training, but for now, these are some of the classic signs, simple signs that you'd be able to have a look at. All right, so now if this happens, I've got a client, we're coaching to a topic, but there's the sense of stuckness, or I'm picking up either through the discomfort that they're showing me. They're sitting in front of me and you can see they're physically uncomfortable, or they're gesturing sometimes. Then I'm alert to something's going on here. So I might ask the question, where do you feel this in your body? Or can you just try this on for me? Bring your attention to it. And the language that I'm using is very inviting. You got to slow it down because you're not working at an ideal level now. And this is a time in coaching when you really, really slow it down. So just bring your attention. I'll often encourage them to be non-judgmental or to just notice it without judgment. The reason for this is we learn to sometimes get over discomfort, like we don't like the discomfort, like a heaviness in our chest when we think of a certain thing. We don't like it because it's there whenever we think of that topic. So we learn to go, it's bad, I don't want that, or we ignore it. But that heaviness in the chest when we think about a certain topic is an indication that our body's trying to communicate with us. But to listen to it or to be able to hear it, you've got to take away the conflict. So invite this non-judgmental awareness, bring your attention to it, amplify it. Instead of hiding it or blocking it, just amplify it. I really want you to turn it up and step into it fully. Feel it, notice it.
And so when we're starting to teach our clients to name what their body is telling them, for many of them, they will be sitting there in your sessions with you and their heart is racing and their palms are sweating. And there is a heaviness that pops up as the conversation gets to a certain point that triggers those responses, but they've got no awareness they should actually mention that. They're having all these feedback. They're either not present to their body or they don't know it's something that you'd want. Or even worse, as a coach, you're like, never mind that, just answer my question. Where you ask the intellectual question, you're going after intellectual kind of outcome or process. So a lot of it's almost giving your clients permission to notice what's going on for them and that you value the feedback that they can give you. So I might say something like, as I ask you these questions, if your body has anything to tell us, I'd love to hear it. Yeah. I'd love to hear if there's any feedback that your body gives you about this topic or anything that comes up, because that's really valuable information. If we can work with that, it's really going to make a big difference to you. So we've almost got to sometimes give permission for the client to give us that data, that information, so we can work with it.
And then the key question is that the client speaks to that part of their body and asks this question, what is this about? So they're asking themselves, what is this about? It's almost a question to the subconscious or to the unconscious, which knows the answer. What's this about? And I'll often give them an instruction at this point in time. Don't judge the answer. Don't intellectualize the answer. Just what's the first thing that comes to mind? It doesn't have to make sense, because particularly a client who's very much in their head, very intellectual, they're trying to intellectually process, but this doesn't make sense. I shouldn't be feeling like this. It's wrong to think like this. How can I possibly be feeling like this still after all these years? I should have overcome this already. So it's a lot of those judgment statements that their more intellectual mind is making about the body now, which gets in the way of listening to it.
When we're asking a what's that about question, I just want to reiterate what Mark's saying. You've got to invite your client to focus on their specific feedback. So as you focus on your beating heart, what's it about? As you focus on the feeling of sweat that you've got, what's it about? As you focus on the discomfort in your right knee, what is it about? And we're inviting the mind to translate from the deeper part of the subconscious that's linked to the body into the conscious where they can give you an answer. And that takes time. So you've got to be even slower than you normally would be to wait for a client to give you an answer. And typically 7 times out of 10, the first answer you get is, I don't know. So we sometimes even instruct the client, okay, slow down. We've got plenty of time. However long it takes, whatever you get, even if it's vague or strange, I sometimes say things, even if you get an answer of orange or numbers or butterflies, whatever you've got, don't self-edit. Just put it out there and we'll work with it. But it's about slowing it down, focusing on the energy, being patient for the answer, and working with what is.
So now the person becomes aware and they might say, it seems to be about this, or it's about that. So slowly this link is starting to be made around, hang on, there's something to this. Now we start working with it. So once a person has an awareness, we want to start asking questions around it. And it's interesting that something that is very vague and slippery at this point in time, often, okay, that's interesting. It's almost like you've opened the door on it now, and they have a bit of clarity on that. Now some interesting questions around so now I've got the client to awareness. Now what do I do? So here's some interesting questions to ask. As you're aware of this thing, ask yourself, what's its positive intent? It's an interesting question because everything has a positive intent. No part of us tries to do harm to us. What's it trying to do? What's it trying to accomplish? Is this useful to you? Tim, in the book Game Changer, talks about this process of keep, solve, or let go.
So basically, we've got a simplified structure we can use, because if it's a keep thing, if the answer is I want to keep it, this is good for me, the interesting thing you got to do is you got to actually thank that part of you, thank that energy, thank that insight, thank that resource, and the energy normally integrates and normally starts to kind of engage. if it's something you need to solve, there's action missing. There's a conversation I'm missing with my partner, with my boss. There's something I need to do. And as you tell that part of you, I will now do this, once you've identified the thing, if it's accurate, that energy will dissipate. And if it's let go, we can use the various tools of letting go, but sometimes you can't let it go all the way. For whatever reason, we're holding on to another leverage. So we've got to work out, can I let it go fully, or do I let it go partially based on what's best for the client?
The reason why sometimes clients, even though it might be an old thing, battle to let go of stuff, it's interesting how the mind kind of feels there's value still in this. I get something out of this. That even though it doesn't work for me at some level, like this is important for me, because taking a traumatic event that's happened in the past, I can't let go of it, because if I let go of it, it would be as if I was condoning it, or I was making that it never happened. So sometimes unconsciously, and then you can coach around that. Okay, so what part of that is worth holding on to? Well, the lesson that I got from it, or the growth that I got from it. Okay, but which part would you like to let go of it? And so by teasing it apart, instead of it just being like a feeling stuck somewhere in the body, the questions would tease it apart into its pieces, allow us now to work with the individual pieces. This is worth keeping. This I understand, I learned from and grew from, but this trauma and this decision, or this doesn't work for me anymore. It no longer fits. It's amazing how once it comes to awareness, and our sense is most of the time the client becomes aware. Every now and then they go, I don't know. It's here, I feel it, but I don't know what it is. What's so interesting though is that it's not always necessary to be able to unpack a thing, to be able to let go of it. It might be that it was very early decisions. Who knows where it came from? There's a part of it. I still ask, okay, so we don't know what it is. We don't know what it's from. But the sense is it's not working for you anymore. It's holding you back from the new behavior you're trying to adopt. Can you ask permission to let it go? What I will often do with a client when they have a strong sense of something stuck in their body is this option of saying, well, do me a favor. Let's take it out of your throat, or take it out of your chest, or take it out of your gut. It often seems to be the places where people experience it often, not always, but often. And just put it in your hand. And I'll ask them to hold up their hand like this and put it in their hand. Let's just look at it. There's something about getting it out of the body, which gives me a little bit of emotional, intellectual distance from it. And I can look at it now. Okay, so what color is it? What does it feel like? How heavy is it? Just notice this thing. All right. What does it want? And we now start talking about it as something separate. Okay, what's its positive intent? What's it trying to say to you? What would you like to say to it? And then, interestingly enough, if you ask the question, now knowing those things, can you let it go? Letting it go from their hand, sometimes I find they find it easier to let go of, rather than something that's stuck perhaps more in the core. It seems to be harder to let go of. So you can work with things that have no words even, which as a coach sometimes is, you got to get your head around that. You don't know what's going on for the client. Even they themselves don't know. Go with the energy, see what happens. It can often have a very big impact.
If they know enough that it's not working for them, that is enough. But there's some blocks that some clients will have, and sometimes even coaches have the same blocks where I can't let go of something unless I fully understand it. And some things are beyond understanding. Maybe we're too young. Maybe it was something that we absorbed or inherited. Maybe something that's not part of our own mindset now. And it's a big trap to have to understand to let go. And the positive intent is quite good, is that if I really understand it, I've got a better chance of it never happening again. But it's a false positive intent, because that doesn't work that way. You just end up creating this attractor for more experiences that are similar to the thing that you're not letting go of. Sometimes we can't get answers from the body where there's a permission thing. I'm scared to get the answer. It's not okay for me to get the answer. I don't want to open up this doorway because it leads to all sorts of other stuff that I'm not comfortable with. And there again, we don't have to go into the story. We don't have to go into the narrative that this happened when I was 10 or 14. All we need to know, is it working for you? Yes or no? Is it healthy for you? Yes or no? If it's not, can you let it go? And can I either help you breathe it out or give yourself permission to let that go. Whatever method you use to letting things go, that's the one you're going for. The most common kind of phrase I offer to clients when they're holding on to something is, can I ask you to keep the wisdom and let go of the pain about that? And that's normally the sweet spot, with that there are these key moments in our lives that are full of both, full of pain, full of trauma, and full of wisdom, but we don't access the wisdom unless we process the pain or the trauma. And what's great, we can still use the coaching framework of, I don't have to know the story. We don't have to go back. All we know is whatever happened, there's a part of it here still with you that's holding you back about this outcome, this goal, and it's not working for you. Can I invite you to let it go?
Some of you might have experienced this if you've ever done physical work. So if you've ever gone for deep tissue treatment, a massage, release techniques like that, how sometimes you can have an emotional response to that type of work. And my sense is that what's happened is that person's accessed perhaps that muscle in some way and released that trigger using a different technique. But here we're working as coaches through this bringing awareness technique to do something very similar. And you'll often find at this point in time, there's often a sense of, to let go of that, that sense of relief. So the metaphor I have in my mind is that the mind moves on, it leaves something behind. And because it's lost now, it can't be released. Through the techniques that we've been discussing, by asking this a question, by bringing awareness back to the body, it's almost like a plastic pipe that's got kinked for a moment. And because it's kinked, it's blocked, it can't go anywhere, it's stuck. What we're doing is by inviting awareness back to it. It's almost like the pipe for a moment just unkinks and it can flow again. Bringing alignment back doesn't mean we're going back to old stuff. Doesn't mean we're rejecting new behavior. We're just bringing an awareness back momentarily. And now what we want to do is, now that we've got that release, now we want to integrate the new stuff. The natural follow-on questions. So now that no longer works for you, what would you rather believe? What would you rather have? How would that feel for you? Now step into that fully and completely and notice what it's like in your body, knowing what this new behavior looks like and how integrated that feels for you. So you understand the process. You pick up something's wrong, you go back, you create alignment and awareness for a moment, you release the energy, you get them to let go of it or integrate it or keep the pieces that are necessary, and then you integrate. All right, now that you've let go of that, what would the new behavior look like? Your chances of that new behavior being integrated now are much higher because that block or that stuckness in the body is now being released.
So one of the challenges we've got with this work is that right now, for many of you, you may have 5 or 10 or 15 pieces of body feedback that's there, but none of them are active in this workshop. They're just sitting there dormant. And so we need a way to activate those pieces of the body that have something to say, have a message to be coached to, away from the heat of the moment. So how do I deal with what's going to happen when I have this tough conversation before the tough conversation? How do I deal with what's going to happen to my body in the final before the final? How do I deal in whatever your thing is? And we all have these moments where we've got to step up, and you'll know them because your body reared its head in that moment and said, hello, you can't breathe very well right now. And there's something deeper than just not breathing that's behind it. So we developed this process called the lightning rod process. And basically what it is that we know that the body speaks when it's a lot of energy in the system, and that's pressure moments. And it normally speaks on the negative energy, but we discovered it can also speak on the positive energy. It's not about the negative or positive, it's just about the intensity of the energy. So we can create intense positive energy. And when we do that, the body will start to speak to us to say, hang on, I've got this part of me that's not aligned with this. I've got this part of me that's saying, not so cool. So this is the process. I'm going to talk through it. I'm going to invite you in your own time on your side to do this process for yourself and get some feedback and get some questions about what it feels like. So the first step is about creating a Blu-ray level movie internally of just 5 seconds or so of what's an absurdly positive result for you. Is it 10 million in your bank account? Is it? What's your absurdly positive result? Is it you sitting on Men's Health cover, Mike?
So those are great examples. So they're obvious and simple examples. So can you imagine climbing on the scale and seeing your body at its ideal weight? Can you imagine opening your bank account statement and there's a huge amount of money in there? Can you imagine being phoned up by your biggest client saying, we want you to come and run this deal for us? Can you imagine giving an opportunity to speak on the biggest platform? Oprah calls you. We want to interview you. What is it for you that in your head, I want this thing? That's kind of what we're looking for. We need to put yourself right up there where the lightning can strike you.
So because it's absurd, the stuff that's in the body are much more likely to pop out and pop out quicker. So whatever your goal is, if you 10x'd it, if it's your diary, if you're saying, oh, I'd love to have 2 months booked to back to back. If it was 9 months, make no mistake that something's going to pop out about that thing that's blocking you. So that's the first step, is to take whatever your current goal, what you're working on, and just go to the very edge of that. Then we need to take the movie that you've got that's just about creating some realness for you. So you're creating a third person as if you're watching yourself on TV. And then this is called various things. It's called meditating. It's called climbing up the meaning ladder. I call it supercharging, but basically you want to keep on adding meaning to this possibility. And you do that by saying, as I think about that experience, what would that mean to me? Oh, it'll be amazing, it'll be awesome. And what will that mean for me? Oh, it'll be life-changing. I'll be so empowered. And what will that mean for me? As you answer that question 6 times in a row, each question will build on the last one, and you get a very intense answer at the top. But there's a caveat. You can't give a negative answer, otherwise the energy doesn't build. So if you say things like, well, I won't be scared anymore, I won't be afraid, we've got to convert it to a positive answer to say, so Mike, if you won't be scared anymore, what will you be instead? I'll be empowered, I'll be full of courage, I'll be, okay, great. And what will that mean to you? So we're using this is a very familiar kind of process for the meta coaches in the room. But whatever your coaching philosophy, it's a way to build energy very, very quickly about a concept, about a potential outcome, about an idea. And once you've done that, you'll know it because your face will be shining. There'll be some energy in the system. It'll be amazing to think about that possibility. You step into the movie. Imagine you step into your body of having that experience of seeing your 9-month fully booked diary, of seeing Oprah on stage introducing you, of seeing, the Men's Health people about to take photo of you for the cover, whatever that is for you. And once you step into it, your body's going to start to give you some feedback about what parts of you says, I'm not so sure about this one. I don't think so.
So now you step into the awareness phase and you just ask that question. Notice in your body, what's happening for you? Like, which part of you is saying no? Which part of you feels really, really uncomfortable when you imagine that? And step into that, fully notice it, and then that process that we've spoken about already. You bring your attention to it. What's this about? And once you brought awareness to it, you use your normal coaching process to unpack it. Is this useful to you? What would you rather have? Let's see if we can work with that. This old belief that you used to have that you're not worthy, or this doesn't fit with you, or it doesn't fit with your identity. Can we let go of those pieces? So normal coaching process. But it's this imagining yourself at the peak of your success. If they phoned you today, how would you feel about it? That triggers a lot of people like, so I often try a light version of this, even with my coaching clients. I say to them, so if somebody phoned you tomorrow and offered you your best job, what's your biggest fear that would hit you first? I'd be scared of this. I feel like this. Okay. So it's such a beautiful process of triggering dormant stuff sitting in the body that doesn't get triggered in our day-to-day stuff. But it's when you get to the Olympic final, that's not the day you want to find out that you've got like stuff sitting there that hasn't been dealt with.
So we've got a bit of time for you to try this out. We'd love to get some feedback. So if you want to take 4 or 5 minutes just to take a moment, fly a kite. What's that awesome result that you're going for? Add another bit of spice onto it. Add some more detail into it. Spend 5 seconds just visualizing it like you're living in a Blu-ray movie. Step in, what does it mean, what does it mean, what does it mean, what does it mean? Get the energy. And as you step into that picture of yourself to get first person again, what does your body tell you? And if you can get one piece of feedback about what is this about? Is it about my stomach saying something? Is it about my throat saying something? You can either do what we suggested earlier, the keep, solve, let go, or you can climb up the meaning ladder, or you can use your own coaching style, but it gets some hidden stuff on the table. And what's really nice about this work is that if it's dealt with accurately, the body tension goes away. So you've got a lovely feedback loop that if there's still more coaching to be done, the tension's still there. But if the tension changes, you've worked through a layer. If the tension disappears, it's clear, it's done. And so that's a really great feedback mechanism also for the client, because they actually know, geez, I got some quite heavy coaching going on today because I had this stuff and it went. And there's often this moment of surprise and, whoa, what happened there? What happened there is the stuff that was dormant became active and available, and we released it because it was no longer relevant or useful.
Okay. Lovely process. If you would like a more detailed transcript of this, drop me a mail, because I've got a PDF for all of you, which is an excerpt out of Tim's Good to Great book, and I'll email it to you as well with the transcript, so you've got a more detailed transcript of how to practice this on yourself and then perhaps use it with a client. All right, we want to open it up a little bit now. Questions and answers. Do you have any questions on what you've just seen or heard?
Or if you had a moment to do your lightning rod, how did it go? I know we didn't give a lot of time for that, but are there questions about content, about technique, about stuff we covered, or even feedback about doing the exercise? Ian?
Tim and Mike, thanks so much for the session. About 10 minutes back, you said it's not totally necessary to understand what that body sensation was, but then you said a little bit after that, now, however you're going to release it, now let's step into the positive. So I guess I'm trying to close the gap. If you didn't have a comprehension of what it was, then what are you sort of replacing it with? Or
so there's two parts there. The one is all you need to know is it's not working for you. So that's the kind of that you ask someone, is this good for you? Now, I don't know. And as you sit around and you kind of process it and work with it, they eventually say, actually, no, I don't really know what it is, but I know it's actually not useful. And so then it's the invitation, okay, if we know enough that it's not useful, do you have to know? Do you need to know? If so, can you let it go? And we normally use the, can you give yourself permission to let that go process? And you'll feel the physical sensation of the thing leaving, or there'll be like some sort of block or obstacle saying, no, I can't let this go. And then we use our coaching process, okay, what's stopping you letting this go? So that's normally the way to, we need to know just enough that's not useful. The second piece is we don't necessarily need to replace it with something in that moment. Maybe they want to have something, but this tends to be the block to the good stuff that they already got. This tends to be the thing that's holding them back. It's normally, it's the fly in the ointment that's the block. And so if that's gone, and all the good stuff that's already been worked on is now lined up and ready to go. Mark, how do you think about it?
So it's interesting, hey, Ian, how the unconscious often wants to work with metaphor. So you might find that in the description, there's a metaphor. Like, for example, this feels heavy. And you can just work with the heaviness. Okay, so now that the heaviness is gone, what's in its place? I feel lighter. Okay. Or people talk about there's a hole. I've got this hole. Okay, so now that we've let go of that hole, what would fill it? And I think, and people can just say, like light or happiness, or you know what, it doesn't need to be filled. I'm happy with where it is. So it's interesting. I would often listen very carefully to the way they describe the experience and use a similar metaphor back to them. And it's amazing how the unconscious often works with that. So they'll often describe the sensation as dark, heavy, a hole, or pain. Those are the basic ones that you often experience. Okay, so now that you let go of the pain or the tenseness or the tension or what would replace it? Nothing. So I wouldn't suggest something to replace it. I would always ask the client, and their own metaphor often provides the information that they need to replace it with.
So Penny Tompkinson, James Lawley got this concept they called David Grove's clean language. And that's all about language of how to work with the metaphor, but not interfere with the metaphor. So if someone says, oh, I've got this darkness, you say, what kind of a darkness is your darkness? And a lot of like helping them unpack it with, because now if we see a hole or hear a hole, we think, oh, they must be full, but maybe their hole needs to be expanded because of that's how their mind's working about that. So they're really being slow in those times to help them unpack it without making it link with our understanding of how the metaphor should work. So what happens next? Very valuable question. Okay, I've got this hole. Okay, what happens next? This happened. And what do you want to do with the hole? Do you want to do anything? And really slowing it down, but not putting our mucky paws in what should happen to a metaphor, even if it's something really simple, like I've got a hole in my bucket. I'm like, surely you want to mend it. No, I want to swing it around my fingertips and throw it at okay, well, cool. As you do that, what happens next?
Thanks, gents.
Pleasure. Any other questions?
I'd like to ask a question, if I may. First of all, Tim and Mike, thanks so much. It's been so valuable and so great to kind of go back to my training so many years ago, meta coaching. Do you find, and how would you work with a client who was very, and I do have clients like this who are so intellectual, who are so cognitive, who are so in their heads, and these types of questions, trying to get them into body to be aware of it is almost uncomfortable for them.
Yeah.
And those are the ones obviously that we know this type of work would be, valuable for them. But how would you suggest working with clients like that?
Great question. Yeah, so I think we've all got clients like that. Couple of things. One is I invite them at first. We're going to take it slow. This is a process that's not just in the head. So you set the frames of, but you really got to feel it. You've got to integrate it through the layers. So we're going to get it slow because that's really where the difference lies. Interesting enough, what I often do when I'm asking people like to try it on or notice it, you know the story, Lucy, from meta coaching training, I watch their eyes. So sometimes when I'm asking a client like to notice something in their body and they start doing this, I know that they're intellectualizing it because they're looking up instead of, if they were really in their body, they would tend to look down and there would be stillness about them. So that looking up, and I go, hang on, stop. I don't want you to think about it. So this is the point in time where I'll step out of coaching and almost become a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? I'll give instructions. Prescriptive. I'll give instructions, yeah. So I'll say, stop. I don't want you to think about it. I want you to just stop for a second and I want you to feel it. And then I frame it. I know this might not be uncomfortable. I know this might be a place that you're not used to going, but this is where the answers lie. So the combination of like stopping them when they break out of it by start talking about it, they'll often say, well, I think it might be, or say, oh, no, I'm not interested in what you think. Okay, because you're thinking something else. I want you to, what's going on for you? What are you feeling at this point in time? So I listen for the words that they're using. Are they thinking about it? I'm talking about it. Could be this. I'm wondering if perhaps, yeah, let me tell you a story. Any of those taglines tells me they're going off intellectualizing it more. Then I'll cut them. And I'll say, look, I'm going to interrupt you. Because the process doesn't require you to think about it. It requires you to notice and feel it. So I'll get prescriptive and hold them in place at this moment in time. And then I might frame, I know it's not comfortable, but just notice it. And it's just for a second or so. It doesn't mean that there's something strange going on, but this is the way we work. Just stop for a second and notice it. So I find that combination of, you've got to be quite firm with them. No,
Direct, yeah.
This is important. Just stop. Just notice it just for a moment. This is important. That kind of framing with being prescriptive sometimes gets clients. You can't get every client into the space. Some don't want to go there. But if you use those techniques, often you can get even those very, very dissociated intellectual clients into the space. And Lucy, there's a sign there that those clients who've got a lot of those patterns, there's probably a lot of ill health there anyway, and they're probably running that pattern for a reason, which is often a lot of the ill health that we see in those. Because I've chronically dissociated from my emotions. I don't interact with my emotions at all. So you've often just got to get them there very, very slowly, because it's such an unsafe place for them.
Sometimes it's about coaching them permission to get feedback from their body. So they're dead from the neck neck down. They've kind of, this is my machine that I'm using. What are you talking about feelings? What are you talking about emotions? I'm neutral, I'm a machine. And so they would have a lot of value from doing that, but getting through times in their life that were tough. Sometimes it's valued in certain institutions. They really value being emotionless about this thing. So you've got to kind of do that careful coaching where, can we coach that you can have permission to work with it in this session? And then if you want to go back to being machine tomorrow, you can. But we know in the back of the mind that, listen, we've got to work on that too, but we're going to go through the body first and help them have a positive experience. And then we're going to bring that topic back later again, saying, hang on, how's it going for you that you don't say I love you to your wife? Like, how's it working for you? and then we go back and we cycle back to the stuff that they're kind of denying. Another tactic that I like to do is invite them to actually drop their head. So Mark spoke about, if you're there, you in your intellect, but you actually look at what your body is telling you. The last thing I'd recommend is starting to be aware of the vocal sounds of when someone's talking intellectually, their voice is a certain tonality, but when they're speaking from their body, it's a slower, normally a deeper timbre, deeper pitch, more hesitant. So as soon as the pitch changes, I know they've got intellectual time. Oh, we're not about that. We can talk about that just now. Right now, drop your head, tell me what your body's telling you. Nothing. Cool, we've got some time. As you focus on the feeling, the sensation, ask yourself, what's it about? And we can sit here for as long as you need and even you get something vague, strange, silly, or bizarre, I'd love to hear it. And that's what we're going to do together. We're just going to sit together until we get some feedback.
And would you agree that with some clients, because I'm thinking of a particular client I had a while ago, where this process just is not suited to a certain client. I had a client, she said to me upfront when we started the coaching, I don't want to talk about my past. I don't want to go there. She just put it up front, and I thought, oh, like, what is this going to be like? And we ended up having, the coaching was very useful for her. It was all performance related, but I knew she could have got so much more out of it. But for her, I just couldn't push it. I just didn't feel that it was right, that I would have broken rapport.
So here's my sense on that, Lucy, is that this is actually quite a useful process for clients who have that frame, because you can deal with it without them having to tell the story. So often they don't need to share the content of past in order to benefit from the process. Because you could say, just notice your body. What do you feel? Oh, it's about something. Okay. And I'll often frame, I don't need to know what it is. You don't have to tell me. It's not necessary. If you want to, it's fine, but it's not necessary. But we can still deal with it. Like, so as you notice that this is what that is about, and I'll talk about that this what's happening for you now in your professional environment is linked to that thing that happened. Just notice it, and then you coach them through the process. You talking about this and that in their heads. They know what this and that is, and there's a safety involved because they don't need to share it. And sometimes there's that barrier between this is a professional coaching in a coaching environment, like I shouldn't be sharing these type of things, and they create some safety because they can deal with it without having to share with you
privately.
Yeah, you deal with it. You know what it's about. Let's see, can we still deal perhaps with some of that stuff?
That's very useful. Thank you.
Cool.
Caroline, you had your hand up a moment ago.
Yes, Lucy actually asked the same question I had. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Lucy.
Thanks, everyone. Really, really appreciate you being with us today. We're going to try and do this more often. At the moment, we're looking at running a training at the end of April, which takes what we've done here in more depth. A couple of hours where we actually go through a lot more depth. So, for example, scanning. Sometimes people simply scan; they don't scan deep enough. And scanning processes to pick up more in-depth stuff, timelining stuff. So working with people's sense of time, past, present, future, is part of that. And then meta coaches will understand the idea of meta programs, so locked in ideas. So when you trying to make changes, for example, around meta programs, a lot of that is embodied stuff. Where, for example, my idea as a leader has a strong body sense for it. I'm a very detail-oriented person. That's embodied. How do you make changes on those kinds of things, also using the body language? So at the moment,
styles,
yeah. At the moment, we're looking at the 28th of April. The price, it's a 4 hours. We're looking at a price of $8.95. If you are interested, please drop me a mail. So I'm going to ask you to drop me a mail anyway, all of you today, for a couple of reasons. That I'd like to email you two things. One is a link to this, if you'd like to watch it again, or if you'd like to share it with somebody. We've recorded it, and I'll offer you a link to it. And secondly, the excerpt from Tim's book, Good to Great. We'd love to share that with you. And then also, we plan on running these type of webinars much more regularly as part of a supervision process. We'd like to share that with you. So please drop me an email, michael@coachingunity.co.za, and then I can get back to you with that information.
Are we actually going to be one of those people who do something on time, Mike? Because normally you've got to have 15 minutes overrun and stuff. Isn't that the way of the world in 2020 part 2?
No, it's a frame of mind. Like, I believe in honoring people's time. So once again, I'd like to just deeply appreciate all of you for being with us today. I hope you got some value. If you've got questions, please feel free to drop it in the mail. Happy to discuss that with you as well. Otherwise, it was really wonderful to connect with so many of you again. We haven't seen you for a while. Appreciate you being with us.
Awesome being in the room with you. And also, we'd love to hear from you how you apply these ideas and skills, because we're looking to create more than just a conversation that stops when the webinar stops. And so that's part of our vision and mission for where we want to go in this year and beyond, is to create that community of learners, community of practitioners. We are got a few steps ahead in one or two of these things, and I'm sure there's others who've got a few steps ahead in other things. And together we can figure it out how to be better for ourselves and for others. And if ever there's a time that we need that, I suggest it's now.